Welcome, my name is Christopher Peter. As a political economist, the idea of a tax, tariff, regulatory fee, or anything that potentially adds cost to the American consumers and taxpayers and businesses is something that I believe should not be taken lightly. Americans are heavily burdened with the cost of the sprawling government bureaucracy and welfare state in many states. Asking more from them without fully explaining the benefits can be challenging. Any fee charged or financial burden placed on a consumer or business can be considered a tax. Like we tend to call inflation the hidden tax when it is directly tied to a failure in public policy rather than a natural event. A tariff will add cost to the purchase of a good from the nation of origin. So, there is reasonable concern when you hear tariffs being placed on goods that people may commonly purchase. Tariffs are not uncommon. There are tariffs placed on goods all the time. Many tariffs are placed on American goods by nations who are our trade partners and allies, but they seek to protect their producers and known exports from being dominated by competing offerings. There are tariff-like conditions as well, where a nation may cap the amount rather than add a cost to achieve the same effect. So, let us discuss the recent tariffs issued by the Trump administration, why they are occurring and why they should be more targeted rather than as broad as what was released during the Liberation Day event. The idea of free trade is something that is cultured into our mindsets as Americans and for many in the West. During our formative years for many of us, we saw the rise of globalization as the world felt that there would be peace through economic cooperation and engagement. Reducing the barriers to trade would potentially lead to the attainment of goods by force. In America, we are also cultured to be open to free market capitalism, where we believe that there really should not be anything impeding domestic or global trade. Let consumers and producers operate without barriers and create market prices through exchanges and interactions. Anything that adds costs or restrictions is considered an impediment that should not exist. The big moment for many of us was the signing of the North American Free Trade Agreement that would create an open market in North America in a similar manner as the European Union. This created reduced trade barriers in two major continents. This was followed by many bilateral trade agreements with other nations or increased trade between nations that sought alliances even if not entering a formal agreement. From an economic outside perspective, this was a good thing. Reduce the cost of trade and allow consumers to obtain the goods and services that they need. Like many things in life, there is a need to look past what is told to us or what we anticipated and see what is actually happening. Because in the environment of free trade, there are still going to be ways for nations to abide by the letter of the agreement but not the spirit of it. This is what President Donald Trump has talked about as far back as his first term and maybe even before then. The idea that free trade is good. But America needs fair free trade. The world needs fair free trade. During the first term, the main focus was around how China manipulated markets in their favor through their own tariffs, currency policy, and other manipulation to shape global trade in their view. Many economists and politicians knew this, but many did not seem to speak loudly enough about it until Trump brought this to the forefront. To be fair, there was concern during the 1990s that China would be a market manipulator. There is a video making its way through social media showing Nancy Pelosi giving a floor speech about why the communist nation should not enjoy its trade status of most favored nation, which is something we all know now. China has been known for its intellectual property rights thefts, undue restrictions on foreign ownership, currency manipulation, dumping, and benefiting from being designated as a developing nation, despite being the second largest economy, while being the world's largest polluter. They have been accused many times of theft of trade secrets and are generally not trusted for final production of goods because of how easily they steal IP and their court system covers them. Personally, I know people who have experienced issues with doing business in China and have also met many businesses who shared experiences in the different forums about how their economy provides a low cost, but there are so many different issues it creates targeting American businesses and others from the West. China is not the only nation that does not compete with open competition in mind. Remember, the action against Parmesan cheese manufactured in the United States. The European Union started using their own form of protectionism by framing that certain things need to be conveniently made in their domestic nations to be considered that product. So rather than put a tariff in place, nations may just inhibit free trade with restrictions on foreign products, caps on imports, or simply steal IP and create a local product using technology developed in the United States. We have seen Europe use their court systems to try to restrict American tech companies in order to protect European companies that no one generally wants to use. So the idea for Trump is that if we truly believe in free trade, then the world needs to actually have free trade, not just the guise of free trade while every nation, but the United States, acts in their own interests with their own tariffs or trade infringements, while people ignore it to avoid making a fuss.
The idea behind the broad tariffs Trump issued seems to be to swiftly rebalance global trade where every nation is going to be coerced to trade equally with the United States and reset the global trade imbalance. That is utopic to a degree, but not really in the spirit of free trade either. But at some point, if everyone else is doing their free trade infringements and benefiting, why not do our own or at least force them to the negotiating table? The goal is to force the leaders of these nations in order to settle their differences. Many of the leaders of these nations will have to balance their political perception at home with trying to atone for the trade policies that are harmful to the United States. Asking nicely was not working or accomplishing much. In negotiations, the hardest part is to get the other party to consider changing from something where they are benefiting to something more of a win-win. The reality in life is that there are not many real win-win situations. Some may appear that way at the beginning, before the unknowns kick in. And sometimes, parties may feel the need to act in their interest knowing that it may look politically bad for their partner while looking great for their own power at home. Do I think the best way to resolve this is to make everyone pay their differences? No, because economies do not need goods and services in the same proportions. Americans generally consume more than the rest of the world, or at least that is the narrative, so there will be realistically some trade imbalances from that. The importance is when nations try to protect their own economies by placing import caps, trade restrictions, tariffs, and other tariff-like behaviors that they are coerced back to the right path and that they are given the chance to course correct and then face reciprocal tariffs. If we are supposed to be allies and partners, then we need to act like it. Now, I do think that we need to do this in a manner where harm domestically is a considering factor. The stock market declines are not ideal. While temporary, they can be impactful to organizations relying on financial assets to fund salaries or pension commitments, prospective retirees planning their exit plans from the workforce, or people simply relying on financial markets to help fund their lifestyles or media companies.
The uncomfort of the short term can make people ignore the long-term needs. In this very publication, I have discussed many times on the need to rebalance trade and make our partners and allies live up to the economic commitments as well as the diplomatic and defense responsibilities. Holding other parties accountable can make some people uncomfortable. I know too many who would rather eat a meal they did not order or receive bad service rather than say something and have the person think they are difficult. Just like you are not rude for standing up for what is right, advocating for yourself, and using your voice, it is not rude or wrong for our leaders to stand up for Americans, our economy, our interests, and our partners. I may agree that we should focus on the bigger offenders and not every single nation in the world at the same time. Or maybe group them based on importance. But, I do think the rebalance had to happen. It is tough, creating some uncertainty, but very needed. Americans should not have to pick up the tab for the rest of the world and defend the rest of the world, while our allies, partners, and those beneficiaries are not doing their part, which they previously agreed to do. Another important goal for the tariff approach is to push economic activity back to domestic providers, revitalizing manufacturing domestic production through leveling the cost of production, making domestic producers appear more affordable, and shift the preference for the cheaper manufactured items imported from economies that may not be operating with the same standards we hold, which some overlook because it came cheap to them and arrived within 2 days. The path will ideally create more American jobs, improve communities and their local economies, and create a more stable and secure supply chain, as our goods and services will not be as impacted by disruptions and political events that we have no or do not want any involvement in. So the idea is based on advancing our economy to a post-globalization one where we are more reliant on ourselves, where the reality that trade does not guarantee peace is crystal clear. Again, trade will not be ended, but partners will need to play fair or they will not have access to our market and economy. May sound confusing, but this is somewhat what our partners are already doing with their economies. They just lack the diversity, innovation, and dynamism that makes our economy unique. The path forward may be difficult in the near term, but if done properly, the future state could be good for Americans, our allies, and our collective interests.
Rational people simply want to live in a free, safe and secure nation with opportunity and governments at all levels that are effective, efficient, and not wasting their tax dollars on programs they did not vote for and that their elected representatives did not vote for either or disclosed if they did. So, the new approach to federal governance should not be surprising, but it is because we have grown accustomed to bad governance by both sides. Republicans talk a great deal about limited government and fiscal responsibility, but few actually deliver any meaningful reduction in spending. Rather, many Republicans simply work to slow the growth of the trajectory of spending. Cost avoidance can be useful, but actual savings and reductions is what is needed to avoid the dreaded fiscal cliff that many have talked about for decades. Even if there is no fiscal cliff, there are pretty hefty debt payments facing our nation. On the other side of the aisle, Democrats have lost their voice, their minds, and their credibility in less than a year, following being exposed by covering up a scandal that they still have not come clean about. That scandal being the cover-up of a sitting president and Joe Biden being out of capacity and prominent members clearly misleading Americans about his condition and who was really running the federal government for the 4 years he was in office. Under Democrats' control of the federal government, with the White House and at least a House of Congress for all 4 of those years, Americans saw their prices across the economy explode, saw their communities overrun by illegal immigrants who overwhelmed the local budgets and services. All the while the Biden administration aiding and abetting their violation of our federal immigration laws. We saw the Biden administration pretty much go for ice cream while the world started to fall apart. So, while President Donald Trump may not be the prototypical example of an American president, his policies are addressing the issues that are plaguing American society and our economy. Sure, it is tough the speed and quickness that these changes are taking place. But there are so many actions taken under the cover of the liberal media and their billionaire supporters who enable Democrats to create a monstrosity of a federal bureaucracy that does not work for the American people, but against them. Democrats try to sell a narrative that Elon Musk is a danger to society, but all he is a threat to is their hidden slush funds and corruption. Like Trump, Musk does not have to help the federal government find efficiency. Unlike all the celebrities Democrats pay to show support for their candidates, Trump and Musk are not making money from their work. The American taxpayers are the beneficiaries. Democrats want to paint narratives that are purposefully misleading. Both political parties have billionaires supporting them. Yet, they are mad when one actually helps create value and efficiency in our federal government. Democrats are not upfront on how come so many of them are growing wealth when they have done absolutely nothing other than public office. If they struggle to pick effective policies, can we really believe that they are better at picking the right stocks and other investment tools without the benefit of hearings and donations? The progressive left wants society to believe Trump and Republicans are fascist, yet it is them who are painting fascist symbols on Teslas and other places during their usual property destruction. How come they believe to their core that public and private property can be destroyed, small businesses looted, and people attacked for the radical voices to be heard? Anytime a liberal gets mad, they are petulant. The left constantly projects their own actions, behaviors, and attitudes onto others. They are angry all the time, dangerous to be around, and are constantly on the wrong side of history. Yet, they think they can deflect responsibility because they hold up idiotic signs that assign responsibility externally for their behaviors. Political stunts, paid demonstrations do not substitute for ideas, leadership, and problem solving. The Democratic Party is the source of the main issues facing Americans today. Now, Trump and the Republicans must not provide cover with their own blunders, missteps, or communication issues. Preferably, Trump will start working more with his Republican-controlled Congress to get laws passed rather than ruling through executive orders. And all Republicans do not want to hear distractions with talking about third terms.
The common approach to political judgment is that people ask for the public to give time for the elected officials they support to prove their effectiveness, while they want the politicians they oppose to show their value within 5 minutes of taking office. Of course, there is little consideration of what the job actually entails, considering what the causes of the problems actually are, and how quickly the staff can accept change. For Trump, he has done quite a bit since taking office, and that is understating his quick action greatly. There is a lot of change that he needed to do in order to achieve his agenda. Compared to the first term, Trump understood the need this time to make sure that he empowered people who would implement his agenda rather than try to protect the status quo of his predecessors, or that of former President Barack Obama, as some are still trying to make his failed policies remain. There are always setbacks faced by every administration, lawsuits by oppositions that impact policy enactment or delaying policy. Every administration faces that. This time the Trump team does seem prepared. His communication team is hitting the ground running, and his press secretary is great at keeping the press in check. The speed of change is important, considering how many obstacles and adversity that will be faced by those obscenely benefiting from the status quo. To some degree there should be a bit more careful thought on some of the planning, but there will always be mistakes in anything. The key is to adjust and fix the process change as you go along. Now let us bust the final false narrative that Democrats and the left are using. Did Americans vote for this change? Yes, they did. The Trump campaign was completely transparent on the change that they intended to bring, including a massive removal of illegal immigrants, rebalancing of trade through the use of tariffs, bring peace to the Middle East and Ukraine, and deliver a limited government through the Department of Government Efficiency, which was introduced numerous times on the campaign trail. The left acts like things do not happen if they just ignore it or decide they do not like it. For instance, the idea of eliminating the Department of Education was not a controversial idea for the leader of the largest teachers union, who said she preferred for years that it would be consolidated into another department so it better impacted the household as a whole. So they support it when it is discussed and oppose it when it is actually done. We're lying then or now? The reality is that Trump is delivering on his campaign promises and what the voters asked for. Now, there is always a large portion of voters who voted for the other side. In 2020, there was a large portion of people who did not vote for open borders, Green New Agenda, reducing law enforcement, diverting funds to NGOs, and global chaos. But Biden and Democrats did not care what these people thought. They deemed them as fascists and the whole other STS. Still, it is the progressives that painting the symbols on Teslas and around. Just pointing out facts. An important thing Trump and Republicans need to consider is how much of a direct impact Americans face up front in a society that is cultured to expect instant gratification. The reality is the change that needs to be made will have some lead time that may be choppy, and it may be rougher than initially expected. If everything works out, then we should have a stronger economy, a slightly smaller and more efficient government, and world peace. Is a government that is more efficient and can live within its means a good thing? Is world peace a good thing? Is having an orderly and secure immigration system a good thing? Is having the ability to defend ourselves and deter attacks with the world's strongest military a good thing? Is investment into our economy a good thing? Then we need to look at the big picture. But the decline in the stock market and potential price increases in the near term can challenge Americans' resolve. Plans always sound good until the discomfort of change occurs. This is why diets fail, people drop out of college, or workers remain in a job that they have outgrown. We must show resolve, but hold our leaders accountable to deliver their promises and ignore the distractions. A big thank you to the audience for experiencing this podcast. The Christopher Peter Review, your source for an economic perspective on salient current events. Please continue to visit the Christopher Peter Review at www.crcreview.com for more, or subscribe on YouTube. Thank you again and talk to you next time.